Good to go. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is January 21st, 2026 meeting of the Dunn County Planning, Resource and Development Committee. Looks like all committee members are here, so we have a quorum. Could have a motion to approve the minutes from December 17th. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Supervisor Kinnear and Supervisor Morehouse. Any corrections, discussion, addition to the minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Do we have any public comments today from anyone? Any? Okay, nobody here for either the regular agenda or the comprehensive plan. We have no public hearings. It looks like we have is Alec here.
Yeah.
So let's, without objection, he's fine with waiting. So we'll give him a chance to take the morning off, kind of a. That's fine. Okay. Then let's go to our staff reports. Register deeds. Heather.
Good morning. This is the December 2025 report. Seems so long ago. December was busy. Surprisingly, the fall of 2025, it stayed consistent with real estate transfers and documents being recorded. Guess I don't have anything else to add unless there's any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Okay.
Thank you.
So we have zoning. Tammy, you're going to fill in for Tom?
I guess there's Tom's staff report up here next.
Any questions about the survey department staff report? Okay.
And yes, good morning. It's hard to imagine we're in January and almost done with this month, and reflecting on 2025 and our December numbers. We did throw in kind of some stats, at least as far as new dwelling numbers from 2025. So we did have 56 new dwelling permitted in our zone townships for 2025. Overall, 176 state sanitary permits. And if there's any reflection, there's 157 soil tests that were approved from March through the end of the year. That's this, any sign of the times, but that's a significant amount of soil test.
Yeah.
Just for a point of reference. But otherwise, I had to, of course, highlight staff going out in this cold weather, still doing septic inspections, and realize that that construction rule doesn't like to shut down anytime soon. So I can.
Any questions of Tammy? Mike?
So 157 soil tests, does that mean 157 people want to put in a septic system?
It could be various reasons for replacement systems. But yeah, it's generally indication of, new systems going in, newer replacement systems.
Any
So-
questions? Yeah,
Excuse me.
sure, go ahead.
So how does that stack up for the number of new homes going in? Is that up, down, or staying the same?
It'd be really that, when I do our 2025 annual report, I'll definitely dive into that data more.
Okay.
It's, an opportunity maybe for the industry just to get caught up and maybe get things in queue for hopefully 2026 construction season. So it was just a good sign that we had that many soil tests in for review. But yeah, ultimately it could, reflection of current construction, new construction, and then replacement systems. Yep.
So these are all, I mean, these are all pretty much rural housing areas, right? Yeah.
Correct.
It's interesting. That trend kind of continues.
And what would be, so, for a sanitation program, though, we cover the entire county. So like our housing numbers, we wouldn't have that for town of Elk Mound, for example. So that'd be actually interesting to add that data in there as to housing starts. That would obviously probably reflect more of those soil tests and that work being done in those communities.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thanks, Tammy. Chase.
Good morning, everyone. Our Land and Water Conservation Division report was in the packet. Be happy to answer any questions you have pertaining to that. A couple things since this report was put together and things you'll see coming up in the next couple committee meetings is related to budget adjustments and carry forwards, but particularly budget adjustments to a few grants that we received post the budget being approved. So those are for targeted runoff management grant that I reported on before that we were applying for, as well as a notice of discharge grant. And then we'll be still waiting for announcement on any surface water grants that we applied for those projects on the Red Cedar River and Lake O'Galley. So just a couple things to highlight that we're kind of in the queue right now, waiting to come before you as we learn more. But be happy to answer any other questions you have of our report.
Yeah.
Chase, the newly permitted non-metallic mining site, where is that? What is it?
So it's over in Springbrook Township, on the northern end, almost to Elk Mound Township. It was actually a sand or gravel pit that probably predated the ordinance, but was never activated when the 2001, 2002, when the non-metallic mining ordinance was required to be implemented. It was chosen to not be permitted at that time, but now it's being asked to be permitted. So with Amanda Hanson, our office, who leads that program, we went through that process, and it's a small 2-acre sand and gravel pit. Yeah, or I shouldn't say, it's probably a little over 2 acres in total size, but it's a relatively smaller site. Yeah.
So we got a couple of like money from different counties. Kenosha was one, and another one. Is that tied to specific reason that we can use those for? I mean, it's just for like surface water runoff, or is it for like pollution control, or what?
Yeah, so we didn't receive anything from Kenosha this past year. That was a couple years ago, but we did receive money from Pepin County this year.
Pepin, that?
Yep, and that was to finish up a conservation practice, which was specifically a well abandonment.
Okay,
So it all depends, but most of the time when we receive money from other counties is tied to an actual technical project, whether that's some sort of erosion control, runoff. Yeah, everything that you kind of mentioned, it could be tied to. But in this
Okay.
particular case, it was a well abandonment that we needed some extra funds to kind of get to that 70% threshold that we try to strive for or are required to meet depending on the situation. So.
okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Chase. Guess you're still on
Me
with
again.
the groundwater work plan.
Yeah, so groundwater ad hoc committee recommendation report. So we just periodically do a review of this. Usually Supervisor Kinnear reminds me that we're due for one, so I appreciate me keeping me on task with that. A lot of what we do is tied to groundwater, so sometimes it gets a little bit, I guess, muddled as far as what we're actually documenting or working towards. But just a few things on here. A lot happened in 2025. Let's see, I can share my screen, sure. There, all right. Not that you can read that very well, but I'll try to zoom in
Perfect.
better. Okay. All right, usually at the bottom of each section, I try to put some of the more recent dates, so I may have reported on this back in June, but the Red Cedar Learning Hub was an effort towards trying to meet kind of a grazing slash agricultural involvement in groundwater protection. That was a process going through UW Stout and the Grass Land 2.0 effort. Unfortunately, that whole thing was not funded, so there's kind of going back to the drawing board. And then following some other financial and budget reasons, probably tied to some federal and state funding, the Grassland 2.0 effort is actually no longer in existence. And there's going back to the drawing board on that. So though that was an effort to try to use grazing and livestock animal management in order to improve water quality. Go back up here. So nutrient management planning, one of the, let me just scroll over here. One of the efforts is to implement nutrient management plans on 100% of cropland and pastureland. We've had this conversation many times about the reality of achieving that in a reasonable amount of time when we're given maybe required to offer cost share, and our cost share funds are quite limited. So the bottom line there on this section is, where we're at for 2025 as far as nutrient management plans submitted to our office. We continue to hover around that 25 to 26%, and that's about 68,000 acres of our 275,000 plus acres of cropland. So we get about $20,000 a year in cost share to implement new nutrient management plans. Right now we are in a situation where we have in the past asked for additional money, like Supervisor Bjork was asking earlier, from other counties to support that effort. And we're probably going to be considering doing that again here in 2027, probably. We have all of our 2026 funds already allocated and probably most of our 27 funds. So our staff are working hard. Travis Dreyer is the leader of that in our office. We have a lot of people lined up. It's just now we're waiting for the funding to come through to help support that. But getting to 100% will be probably a different conversation what that looks like if we wanted to achieve that.
Can I interrupt you?
You bet.
As I was going through this yesterday, I thought, that the 100% goal was always aspirational. But I wonder at this point, when we obviously know that you're working extremely hard at it, shouldn't we change the goal at this point to something that's more achievable? I mean, we're probably, certainly not in my lifetime going to get to 100%. So it just seems like we're holding you to an unrealistic and unachievable standard.
Yep. Potentially, I think part of the conversation is around having a nutrient management plan on file for someone versus someone following a nutrient management plan and implementing it. And where we've probably tried to spend more of our time or starting to focus a little bit more is the implementation of nutrient management plans. If you look at counties, and especially on the eastern part of the state, Brown County, Door County, Kewaunee, some of those areas, they have high coverage of nutrient management plans, like 80 to 100%, but they still have groundwater contamination issues and other things. So it really comes down to the implementation of those plans and what they mean. So yeah, maybe 100% isn't a realistic goal that we want to achieve, but I think it's part of a conversation, especially as we develop our land and water plan, where you all would like to see us spend that time in the coming years.
Makes sense.
I can just highlight a couple other things real quick. I don't know if you noticed some of the grazing and pasture events that our producer-led watershed groups have done, emphasis on groundwater in some of the producer-led group work. Also, Tina in our office is planning a groundwater-specific event with the Red Cedar Conservation Farmers coming up here sometime in February and March. We've been asked by Jerry Clark, our ag agent, to help participate and structure a region-wide Eau Claire, Chippewa, and Dunn County kind of a groundwater summit or water quality summit. So there's some outreach efforts there. And then I think there was one more I was going to say. Just that our funding that we've been operating under for our private well monitoring program, we are continuing that again into 2026. So you'll see more of that activity here. As Heather gets the 2025 report done, we'll come back and give a presentation here as well. So with that, I guess if you read through this report and see anything you want to talk about more, I'd be happy to. Otherwise, I would say as we develop our land and water plan, the elements that are in the groundwater ad hoc recommendations are at the forefront for how we may want to plan that, put into that plan, but also our annual work plans to help continue to keep us in check and keep us on task with achieving some of this.
Mike,
Thanks for bringing it back, Chase. If you go to a green one where it says aggregate existing spatial data relevant to groundwater protection.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, over on the right side, it says decision that departments will scan and email any new sample results to Rachel. I wonder if they're still doing that. It just, sometimes we say things are going to be done.
Can you point to me where?
Over on the right side,
Yep.
1, 2, 3 in parentheses.
Oh. Yeah, so right now, that was an older way of doing it.
Okay, so what's happening?
Yeah, so right now, basically any data that comes in through Public Health Lab, any data that comes, the results come through our programs, but even though all of our samples are run through our Public Health Lab here, that's all getting into a database that then can populate that well water viewer that's on our website. So Rachel is involved in that still, but certainly it's a much smoother and a little bit more efficient process than scanning well sample results. Now, if someone comes in with a general landowner comes in with some water sample data that they'd like to share with us, that would be a time where we would maybe need to scan that or somehow digitize that and make that part of our GIS layer in order to get that populated into our overall data. But for the most part, it's mostly electronic now.
So is it working out pretty well with the county having our own testing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very convenient, and I know they do a good job right there so far. So,
Thank you.
Monica,
Following up real quick, who is Rachel?
Rachel Wells is in the Land Information Office, so a lot of our GIS online data sets that we have for the well water viewer. If you go to our Land and Water Conservation page or ENS department page, there's a groundwater section, and there's an interactive mapping tool there, and that's where we rely on our experts in that field to help us populate that.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
anything else? Okay, thanks, Chase. Number 9, legislative agenda.
So I'm gonna just pull up what we have right now, and then as there's decisions and edits we want to make, we'll kind of do it on the fly so you can see it, and
Sounds
then
good.
we'll go from there. I don't know that we discussed a particular order, other than if you want to go top down.
Let's just go through it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Say something.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, the Health and Human Services legislative agenda is, of course, like long. And I just made a command decision to pull out the 2 that relate to water. So we need to pull those back. So it should be down at the
It's at the bottom.
towards the bottom.
It's last.
Yeah.
So-
I pulled them out of the HHS
Oh, okay.
agenda, so
Those
we
used to be
need,
on ours. Yeah.
well, and we just decided that we would
Yeah.
sort of share those, but I knocked them out, so if we want them back in, they need to come in and under land use.
Okay.
Want to tackle them right now or start at the top?
Well, maybe we should, since you got up on screen. So these are recommendations that this committee made a number of years ago. And
Correct.
eventually, when the partnership with public health became, on water quality became
Exactly.
more active, they got moved over to their legislative agenda.
Right.
And Diana's suggesting that we move them back to ours. Why do you suggest that, Diane?
Well, I suggested it because just because the Health and Human Services legislative agenda is so long
Yeah,
and so complicated, and I don't know if it gets digested anyway, but it just seemed like this made it a bit more complicated.
that makes sense. So the one thought is that we could just reincorporate these into our recommendations.
If we still want them.
If we still want them, yeah. So let's discuss whether or not we still want them. And any discussion of either of these? Mike,
As for Chase, I guess, didn't the state compensation for new wells or didn't that change a couple years ago?
Yeah, but it's still an issue. So it changed a couple years ago based on ARPA funding. So the governor at the time used ARPA funds to, I guess, reduce the restriction on eligibility in the well compensation program. So, for example, if you have a contaminated well and you want to seek assistance in either replacing that well or getting treatment on it, you need to have either a bacteria issue or a nitrate concentration of 40 parts per million or higher, which is 4 times the health standard. You need to have I believe it's some sort of income threshold of not more than $60,000 a year. And typically that water also has to is providing water for livestock. So when that new funding came in from ARPA, it eliminated those restrictions, which opened the door for many people to have access to it. And this, letter B here, 8B, is really saying, I guess in my opinion, is trying to make permanent the well compensation program as it was maybe rolled out when they had that additional funding. Because right now it's very underutilized. There's funding that's not being spent, even though it's set aside, and that's mainly due to the eligibility restrictions on it. And I can add a little bit of context to 8A as well. So it's pretty fresh. I don't know if it's actually been assigned to any particular Senate bill or Assembly bill yet, but I believe there's a legislative reference bureau number for it. I just don't have it off the top of my head right now, related to additional funding to support well monitoring, drinking water monitoring in the state. So I believe 8A would be in support of that, should that get some traction in the legislature. But I don't have any details on what that actually is right now. But it was a significant amount of money. I don't know where it's going to come from, but to support that.
yeah, I think that, the problem with drinking water monitoring has been funding it. And it wasn't until ARPA came along that we could
Right.
even consider funding a program. And right now, there hasn't been any sort of significant source of funding from the state that counties could draw on to do continued programs. And we as a committee decided that was a pretty high priority at one time.
I agree.
So so the discussion is, should we readopt these two policies within our committee's legislative agenda? Kind of
I say
a
yes.
motion to that, one way or the other?
I will, Mr. Chairman, I will move that we perhaps revise language a bit, but include both of these items in our committee's legislative agenda.
Is there a second to that? Any discussion? Do you want to make those amendments now, or do you want to make them later? Or-
Well, the only one that I actually would recommend is on B to make permanent, as Chase said. I think otherwise they're fine.
So where would that go, Dan?
On B, instead of recommend changes, make permanent.
Recommend changes.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's a amendment. Um, s- I'm gonna just rule that we'll just leave that sit there for the time being as
Okay. Okay.
a consensus proposal. Um, any others? Possible amendments or considerations to the language? All right, so we've reviewed the language and made a modification that we agreed on. All in favor of recommending these or of including these two recommendations in our legislative agenda, say aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed, say no. Okay. So done.
I'll just move those two up after we're done. Yep.
Uh, Should we just go through these?
Sure.
One. Establishment of a Wisconsin Legacy Fund. This is, again, something that has been on our agenda for 15 or more years.
Exactly.
Any thoughts about removing it, or is it? If there are no thoughts about removing it, I'll leave it there for now. Okay. B. Also on
Keep
our
it.
agenda for 15 years. Any
Maybe we should
objections
keep
to
that one.
any objections to leaving this on there for now? C. So we've had some discussions about about what this means. I think our general view has been that this is regarding very large operations that are that have an unexpected, may have a fairly large and environmental land use concern. I know there's not necessarily unanimity on the committee about this, but any discussion of whether we should keep this or not? Sure.
I'd like to know like what like large means. I mean, that takes in a broad kind of like, is it large, like, you over a little bit or you over a whole bunch or?
Yeah, so I think this is a ambiguous agenda, a recommendation. But it is, this is a topic that there have been all kinds of efforts to have discussions about in the legislature over the years, and very difficult to have them. And I think all this does is recognize that there are potentially unexpected impacts from us allowing unlimited size in the CAFO regulations, and saying that those that given that there may be a need to consider some modifications that would allow local communities some kind of regulatory input. I don't think it's necessary to put a limit on it. I mean, CAFOs are defined by a limit, but the upscale is not. And so I think we'd be leaving it to regulators and policymakers if they consider this problem, to think about, well, how do we define that limit? It's not really the role of our committee to, I don't think, to specify that, or our county to specify that. But rather to set a sort of framework that says we need to consider whether there should be some kind of regulatory authority over a certain limit. That's my view of it. So I would argue for keeping it. Any further concerns with that?
I think we should leave it, but I always have, as we plow through these legislative agendas, I always have a question about, do we include all of these aspirational things that we know are not going to happen? Or are we more pragmatic about things that perhaps we might see in our lifetime be implemented? I don't know. It's just a general observation. And that's one, it's probably not going to happen. Right?
Well, no, I think actually that at some point in time it will happen. At some point in time, there will be some changes to the livestock sighting regulations. And there will be, when that happens, there will be consideration given to what, if any, role local governments could play in some of the considerations. But it's not, is it on the, there is legislation that's being considered now that would allow, which I don't necessarily support, that would allow local input on certain things. So it's not like a dead topic.
Okay.
But I'm not, I'm really realistic too, and I would argue for Tammy.
Would it be helpful to like further define what that means? So like, I mean, if I looked at, my experience this last year, trying to permit one of our CAFOs, it really came down to the nutrient management acres and the inconsistency between where the manure is going, but what's being reported. And then landowner agreements actually being in place for those nutrient management acres. So it seems like that is potentially the gap that's not really being addressed by either this, DADCAP or DNR. So perhaps, if this was going to stay, it further clarifies what this focus would be.
Yeah, I agree um, that would be getting down into what are the specific criteria under which a nutrient management plan is evaluated. Which they're supposed to do already, aren't they? I mean,
Yes.
they're supposed to have committed acres. It's a question, that question is, how do you document that the plan is, meets the standards that that seems like
It's developing a comprehensive nutrient management audit or a centralized tracking system. I mean, everything is, especially if you're crossing county lines, things aren't being communicated. So, and then these contracts aren't in place with landowners. I mean, I think that was, again, I'm not speaking specifically to Dunn County, but in other counties adjacent to us, those contracts weren't even being produced by landowners, right? So it was showing that nutrients were going to be applied to lands and no agreements were even in place for those landowners to
right,
apply.
I understand.
So it's more of a centralized, robust nutrient management tracking system. And again, that's
Mike,
Something like Tammy is mentioning does seem more doable because it's supposed to be done already. Versus this, there could be two separate ones. It could be built into that, but it seems like it'd be nice to have something that you could actually get done because it wouldn't be introducing any more restrictions or regulations at all. It'd just be a way of managing them. It seems like a good ask. But would it be up to the state to have some kind of central processing area for that, or is that what you're suggesting? Yeah,
Well, I
Rachel.
think there's, I mean, when we get into the CAFO world, concentrated animal feeding operation world with a WPDS permit, that is directly regulated by the state DNR. And there are requirements that they must meet for their nutrient management plan and spreadable acres and documentation. Whether or not there is capacity to do a sufficient review and tracking and communicating of that is probably maybe more of the debate or the discussion. But yeah, there's certainly situations where, like right now, we have, I mean, we try to internally here, any nutrient management plan that comes in, we're trying to map those acres so we know if another plan comes in and they've mapped the same acres, that we need to have a conversation. So kind of getting to that point of like duplication and, well, which plan does it belong in? It doesn't happen that often here that we're coming across, but it does happen in my experience. I've had it. So when it comes to like this particular request, my interpretation of it in the past was the limitations on livestock sighting. If a county adopts livestock sighting in their zoning, that there is a requirement that you cannot limit the size of a facility or operation. And yes, that does come back to spreadable acres. And if you don't have enough acres to spread on it, then there's your size limitation there. But we're not seeing, especially in the surrounding region, that as being a true limitation for expansion or sizing of facilities. They're coming in with acres and nutrient management plans, and they're obviously getting approved because they're building these facilities. So I'm not sure exactly where this particular item C goes. If it's intended to have more local regulatory authority over the size of facilities and their location, or if it's an acceptance of that we will have unlimited size in areas of the county, and how do we manage them, to me is a little bit, is like two different things in a way.
Say that again.
So the issue of livestock sighting, if you adopt it, you must allow for farms of any size. You have to allow an area, so whether that's through your zoning districts or whatever, to allow farms of any size. So is this statement getting at that as being the issue, or is it the details of, if we're going to allow farms of any size, what specific restrictions or limitations do we want to feel are necessary to control that? Are they allowed at all, or are they, if they're allowed, then how are we going to manage them? And it seems like we're talking about, not that they can't be related and connected, but
It seems to me the second one that you said is the way I would interpret this.
Too.
But I understand that it's not clear.
is it, so if a CAFO facility chooses to expand through livestock sighting in our county right now, we require a nutrient management plan for that process. If they're adding manure storage, we require a nutrient management plan update for that, and we're going to look at what that plan says. we do not collect land use agreements with landowners or manage that. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to, but that is why we've done the mapping tool, is to try to, can we at least capture where we know nutrient management plans are? That's our best effort right now to make sure there's not duplication, but that is not going to, I mean, when we only have 24% of nutrient management plans turned in a given year, we're gonna have acres that are likely included in a farm's expansion and their nutrient management plan that we won't know if that landowner's agreed to it or not.
And it's, I mean, the reporting by the operators is voluntary.
Right.
Um, So the way I saw it, I mean, I'm fine with taking this out. I really am. I think it's aspirational and so it's not that I'm not gonna die on this hill. But I think it's a little bit like the debate over uh, um, data centers, for example. We have an industrial park and all of a sudden we have a proposal for industrial development, which is seen by the community as uh, potentially damaging to the core economic health, environmental health, and whatever. And so people say, well, we need to find a way to deal with that special situation because it's an unexpected activity. And I think that's what this is saying about livestock operations, is that because the state law removes regulatory authority from local government, which I'm not saying it shouldn't. I think there's reasons why we have a unified standard, but we're seeing, not yet in Wisconsin, but some proposals in Wisconsin even to uh, establish very large CAFO operations. And I don't know whether back in, I don't know how long ago it was the CAPO regulations were established, 15 years ago, I can't remember, but there was a huge debate about it. And I don't know that people could have anticipated that we would see, in some states, we would see 20, 40,000 head dairy operations going in, like they're going in North Dakota now and Western Minnesota. And those may be able to meet the kind of standards that Chase is talking about, but right now we have, if that does happen, the only the only consideration that local governments have is the livestock siting law, which is controlled by the state and the DNR, and which is based on, I suppose it's technically, it's based on environmental considerations and limitations, but but the review of those is not as robust, I would say, in terms of local control as it maybe should be in some cases. But you know what? I'm willing to take this out if people are uncomfortable with it. To me, it's a relatively useful statement, but I don't think we're quite ready to take it down to the detail that Tammy's mentioning. And I'm not sure there's a way to revise this so it I mean, could we? Yeah,
So as I'm listening to this conversation, I just kind of look at the legislative agenda and how it's intended to be used. And so there is a change in how we're going to go about that this year that the legislative committee had adopted. So this document as it is will get adopted and we'll share that with all of the legislators throughout the state. We know that they will spend countless hours reading through every line of it
For sure.
but in addition to that, as opposed to what we had done in the past of inviting all of the legislators to be here and to kind of go over the agenda, we're shifting that. So myself and Supervisor Steen, the chair of the legislative committee, will be setting up individual appointments with the elected officials that represent Dunn County and really going over each of these items in a one-on-one conversation. So I guess as I heard some of that discussion related to that and maybe some of the gaps in the legislation, I think part of that is identifying the problem and not necessarily suggesting the solution, but to bring up to a representative, there's a breakdown here in how this is being done. And I think that your intention is that it is done, but there's a gap in the statute. So to bring that up might be something that a legislator would be like, yes, that makes complete sense. Let's see if we can figure out something to do that. So I don't know if I would get into those finite details. I look at that as a little bit of a license for myself and Supervisor Steen to speak on behalf of the board related to these items without me providing my own opinion about that, but rather providing the opinion of this committee and the board as it relates to that. So I don't know that we need to get into those details, but I think if you identify a problem, I think it's valuable. And I think this change in having those one-on-one conversations could open up some opportunities to just maybe plug a few of the holes in the raft. So if that
Thank you,
helps
Dan.
or muddies it.
Yeah. Thanks.
No, it doesn't.
Well, and that's kind of how have seen this, as I've proposed this regulation, this in the past, is that it's sort of a placekeeper for a discussion about what, if any, about what the role that local government might have and how we might think about that being an issue that we should look at as a state. So I'm gonna argue that we leave it there for now.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, is there any objection to that?
I don't have an objection, but it seems like we're asking for the sky when we could be more specific and say, here's our problem, like Dan said. And I've always thought, why do we sit up here and tell the legislators how to do it? You know,
Well,
they've got the big picture and say, here's our problem. You know, we've got suggestions, but this is like asking for the sky. Could we refine it a little bit? Or I'm also okay with leaving it in there because of the fact that it'd be better if it was refined, but if we leave it in, it's not going to change anybody's mind either way. But if Dan hadn't heard what we were talking about today, how would he have communicated with legislator that, hey, you know, we've got these gaps that we'd like fixed?
I'd like to hear what Chase thinks, because he's the expert. And
Well,
I'm
Tammy and I are,
certainly not. Yeah, both of you.
Tammy certainly administers the livestock sighting portion of our zoning ordinance specifically, but I guess a little bit of maybe background to my knowledge. So the livestock sighting law came into effect because of multiple different counties and municipalities adopting different ways to regulate farms of 500 animal units or larger or certain sizes. And there was an inconsistency and maybe some argument of unfairness across county lines, across municipal boundaries as to, well, if I go over here, I can do this, but I can't do it here. So the state legislature came through and said, here's AdCap 51, here's a livestock sighting law. If you're going to have a farm of 500 animal units or larger or expand, you know, more than 20% within that, then you need to follow these rules, and these are the rules that you're going to follow. So for all intents and purposes, if a farm comes to us today and comes through, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Tammy, but like if they meet the criteria that this livestock sighting law has, there really isn't a way to say no, even though we may have a concern for a particular local issue. So that goes back to my personal interpretation of this particular section is, do we want more local control over or influence onto what those farms, if they're expanding and how we might control that. And that's, that's where I see it might not be it might be unique to each farm's request that we can't necessarily delineate right now, depending on its location and where it is. But really, it comes down to either we follow the state law the way it is, which is what we're doing, and we're obligated to issue a permit if they meet that criteria, and that is basically with very limited local influence. I think to me, that is the question, is do we feel we need more influence and decision-making, approval processes, that are unique to the county in the specific location? And I apologize, Tammy, if I'm speaking out of turn, if there's something you want to add on your side, but.
I would just offer again the legislative gaps. My experience with the last one that we just went through, again, was if staff maintain this mindset that if they show us that they meet the rules, they're fine, but yet they're using data that's 2 years old to show that they're in compliance, and then we as zoning are expected to enforce this and audit them and maintain annual records, there's a huge gap, or a 2-year gap, in some cases where the data is delayed and they're not even showing us projections to future land use acres. So again, I would just offer that there's a legislative gap between DNR and DATCAP and local rules on who's doing what. So. And the public's expectation of us being accountable, holding these property owners accountable. So just because they can show that they're meeting the rules 2 years ago, does that mean we should be permitting them today? So again, if this reads, it's just saying meaningful permitting and regulatory authority. That's how, if I broke that down, it's just asking us to have a meaningful system and give us authority to enforce it.
So to me, as it's written, it sort of provides a framework for that discussion to happen. And says that we as a county are concerned that we have that we allow for that kind of discussion. But
If I heard
Yes.
Tammy correctly, and Chase, actually, both of you, it's about clarification of roles and responsibilities and finding ways to ensure that the DNR and DACAP are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Which is quite a bit different than what this statement asks for. And might be more realistic. I don't know.
Could we leave this in here for now and ask staff to come up with another one that would be more what we were just talking about with Tammy, what Diane said? And we can compare the two and.
sure. Yes, so it seems like that's what I was going to suggest too, Mike. So we have another meeting. This is going to come to the, let's bring this back to our committee next time and this particular item.
Yeah.
And see if we can come up with a language that's addresses it more precisely.
Yep.
E. Any thoughts, concerns? Should we include it? Anybody think we should not include it? Okay, E. This has been on for a while. I'm not sure if what do you people think? This is,
Doing this for Neil.
what not?
I
I'm
can,
doing it for Neil.
I can provide some context of where we're
Sure.
at today. So we have come to a point where we request data from DNR. They've provided basically a spreadsheet or a list. It can get us down to quarter section, not the exact field boundaries, but close enough to where I feel the need for this is, are we incorporating land spreading of human septage and the nutrients associated with that as part of an overall nutrient management plan? So if someone's out there applying commercial fertilizer and septage, are the two talking together and we crediting each other for that? I feel comfortable that we're in a situation where we can request that data from DNR. We could map it ourselves, and if it overlaps with a nutrient management plan map, then we know we need to have another conversation with that landowner as to, well, is that being incorporated into the nutrient management plan? So I was not here when this was originally added to the legislative agenda, and if that meets the purpose, but I feel like we're in a better place than we were a few years ago.
This was one of the original recommendations of the groundwater committee too. So is this something we can take off the agenda as having satisfactorily?
Probably.
This is good news.
Yeah.
I love it. We can take something off.
I know, right?
Let's do that. Thanks for the context, Chase.
Anybody have a problem with taking that off? Okay,
Mhm.
all right, done. F. Heather, where are we at?
Yeah. This actually has a bill numbers assigned. But it's this is ties in with on page 2, the Committee on Admin and Planning Resources and Development support an increase in funding for the Wisconsin Land Information Program. It's all tied together now as one Senate Bill 218, Assembly Bill 216. I think the status is available for scheduling. I know after the fiscal estimate was completed, the way this is laid out, there would be a reduction in funding for the state. The state share would be reduced and the counties would definitely gain because 50% of the transfer fees would go into the county general fund. And then also additionally, there'd be a share that would go to the Wisconsin Land Information Program. And again, that's what Rachel, the land information officer, she maintains those funds. So those are both tied together. So
That's been adopted, or is it within the administrative committee?
has the bill assigned and the status is available for scheduling. So it has not proceeded past, since it hasn't been come forward again. And I don't know that it will, just based on the fiscal estimate and the funding for the state being reduced and concerns with federal funding as well. So I don't know if it will move forward, but it does have bill numbers assigned. And we would, I spoke to Rachel and we would definitely like to see, we definitely support this. And would like to see it move forward, but not sure that it will.
Should it be, I mean, if we leave it in, assuming that it won't pass this session, should the language be revised to incorporate, I don't know, incorporate bill numbers or some more specific guidance?
Certainly could, and it could be combined, it could be,
Okay.
this is a suggestion removed from land use and placed just within the Committee on Admin
So
and
this
Planning.
was the recommendation from committee administration. And it's kind of coming from both of us.
Correct.
So that maybe that takes care of the issue.
So yeah, you could combine them and add the Senate bill numbers if you so choose.
Doesn't specifically speak to the county share.
No, I think we'd want to add this language, the support for also retaining the larger transfer fee within that,
Yeah.
um, within number 3. Because that's what the bill provides for. The funding is, it's 50% to the county, which is to the county general fund, and then it's 20% into the Wisconsin Land Information Program, which then results in the county then requests grants from the Wisconsin Land Information Program.
That's satisfactory to people.
Mhm.
So we would shift our resolution into the community administration and planning resources joint resolution and add that, suggest adding that language to it.
Do you want them?
Okay, back to the,
And if I might,
Yeah.
Chairman Quinn, I don't know if this also falls with under land use, but the Wisconsin Register of Deeds Association has been working on cleanup, I guess, and updating language in 5943, chapter 5943, which governs the Register of Deeds offices. And that also has a Senate bill, an Assembly bill number assigned. We've been working with land title and realtors. And so again, I guess I haven't ever provided you with all those changes, but it isn't a complete revision. It's just more cleanup, clarifying language, modernization of that statute. So I would ask for the support of the county for that. If you felt it, again, if it would fall under what we want to accomplish within our legislative agenda. I mean, it is just for the Register of Deeds, the Register of Deeds office.
any thoughts on, how about this? Why don't we we're gonna be dealing with the other item at our next meeting. Maybe you could bring that back in the form of a pared down resolution that we could review.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do that.
G, recommend revising chapter 33 to allow absentee voting at the annual or special meeting of a lake association. Lake district. Chase, it's still a burning issue with them?
I haven't heard it
Yeah, I don't think so.
said. I think there's a,
I think we could take this off. It's my feeling. Anyone disagree? Hasn't been a problem so far.
not to my knowledge, it hasn't been expressed to me, but I didn't ask either, so to be fair.
Mike,
I did ask a few people, and because the meeting was set up in the summertime, it wasn't a problem. Only if it was when the snowbirds were gone. So for what it's worth.
I think we can delete it.
delete it. Anybody opposed to that? Okay. I did have any other items people want to bring up as possible agenda items for the legislative agenda? So I did have one thought at the last housing work group meeting. Adam McCullough, the economic development director, brought forward some legislation that's being considered currently be considered by the legislature with regard to housing. And several of them seemed like they were worthy of support, in particular one that called for establishing a special TIF district for residential development. But Adam was gonna send that, and I didn't get it, until this morning. So, maybe, I'll share that with the group, and
Yeah.
then if we could bring that up potentially at the next meeting for a possible housing related item. Now, I think that that would be appropriate for our committee, but
Mhm.
maybe not. I don't know.
Doesn't clearly belong anywhere else. So I think we take it.
CRNT does economic development now, but they just met, so it's too late to come back to them. So anyway, we'll put it on here and see what we got. Anything else?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Can we go back to the Lake District one? I kept my mouth shut and I shouldn't have. I feel very strongly it needs to be in there. I think that this isn't just an issue about the snowbirds. I think that this is people with disabilities, people with children, other obstacles. I know that nobody's expressed a problem, but I think from the standpoint of a democratic process, it's important to have representation at a meeting where they're making decisions about a tax levy. I think it's important that it needs to be changed.
So you would argue for leaving it in there?
I would.
Okay. Anyone want to argue against that? It's fine with me. You feel strongly about it?
Good for you.
Thanks.
All right, so we have review, anything else, any other topics? It seems like we're gonna have to vote on some other items anyway. So maybe we should wait for a final vote until we have resolved these issues. Now I think our next meeting is prior to the executive committee meeting, so we should be able to take care of that. Okay. Anything else on this topic? Thanks staff and just for everybody for the good discussion. Item 10, approval of the wildlife damage abatement claims program crop prices. Alec, come on.
Morning. My name is Alex Andelius, USDA Wildlife Services. I administer the wildlife damage program on behalf of Dunn County. I had just a couple things for you today. The first is just a summary of the 2025 enrollees in the program, name, resources, species causing the damage, the abatement I prescribed, and the township in which they enrolled parcels. I can answer any questions you have on that. Otherwise, we can move on to the actionable items.
No question? It seems like there's a lot of the same people up there that are getting like shooting permits for deer,
Mhm.
but apparently it's not going down. There's still the same number of deer or because you got like some people that are there every year.
Yeah, so
And
every year you participate in the program, whether you get a permit or equipment, you have to re-enroll, and if they meet the damage threshold for shooting permit issuance in any given calendar year and request assistance, it gets reissued. And, I'm of the opinion a lot of these issues with deer, especially in the northern half of this county, it's a landscape level issue. Like, the deer herd needs to be reduced in the context of ag damage, and I can try to mitigate their loss as much as possible through the issuance of permits on a site-specific level, but, these permits aren't meant to reduce the herd at a landscape level. It's meant to put pressure on deer on the enrolled parcels to reduce damage. So, yeah, there's a lot of repeat names year after year, and their damage justifies it.
the other question, it seems like there's a lot of bear damage. Is there getting to be more bears in Dunn County or just more people like realizing there is some hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general trend that the department's aware of is a stable or increasing bear density in Dunn County. Some of this is just proactive enrollment, like if you're a beekeeper enrolling and getting an electric fence up, even though they may not have been hit by a bear yet, the bear density justifies having the fence up to just try to not wait until there's a bunch of damage before we get a fence up. Good, okay. First actionable item, set a crop price. So the commodities that there'll be claims on this year, soybeans, corn, and beekeeping supplies. For the grain, I track the monthly cash price at some elevators on this side of the state and then average that together. As far as apiary beekeeping materials, most of these folks use the same handful of companies, and I just average the prices for the two damaged commodities in the context of the one damaged claim in Dunn County. This committee has authority to make the prices whatever they like. I think these prices are in the wheelhouse and fair. They're consistent with some of the prices approved in surrounding counties. Can answer any questions you have, but yeah, that's what I've got.
Any questions? So we need to approve the prices, Alec, that's
Correct.
okay. We have a motion to approve the prices as proposed. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Diane Morgan. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion's approved.
All right. There are three claims. There's a $500 deductible associated with damage claims. So you see the appraised loss that I appraised. The claim total is that appraised loss less the $500 deductible. All three of these claimants met all the deadlines required by the program, and they implemented my prescribed abatement. And I have no reason to advocate for them to be denied, and so I'd recommend approval.
Any discussion? A motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the recommendations as submitted.
Supervisor Morris moves. Is there a second? Supervisor Kinnear seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That's approved. Thanks, Alec.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
There's just one question, like where does that money come from that we're paying these people?
So this program is funded by the Department of Natural Resources. It passes through the county. The program is administered by the county, but it's funded by the state. And the state there's an excess charge on the sale of all hunting licenses, and all monies generated from the sale of bonus antlerless deer tags fund this program. So it's not tax dollars through the state, it's $100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is all we have on our agenda for today. Next meeting scheduled for February 4th. Anybody have any announcements, last words? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much.